Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope everyone's doing well. In this episode, we're going to be focusing on the brain and the health of your brain and what you can do to help optimize that health. So I'm going to give you 3 tips and 1 bonus tip. So if you stick around for that, and if you grasp the concept of that little bit of advice, it really can change your life for the better. So before I go into those 3 tips, I want to explain a little bit about the brain. I'm not going to overcomplicate things, but I think it's important for you to grasp the complexity of the brain, and then you get a good understanding of why it's important to try and look after it. So the brain on average weighs about 1.5 kilos. It's made up of 75% water, has 100 billion nerves, and 100 trillion connections that connect those nerves. So those numbers are just vast. But like I said, I think it's important for you to try and understand that, so it might help motivate you when it comes to trying to improve the health of your brain. And it's important to remember here that these tips aren't just going to help with the health of your brain, but it's going to help with overall health, because it's very difficult to isolate your health. When you change one thing, it has an effect on another. So everything affects everything when it comes to health. And one thing I want to mention here before I go into those tips is that your brain is always changing. From the moment we're born to the moment we die, there is constant rewiring, old connections being repaired, new connections being made. So I just want you to bear that in mind, because it might have something to do with that bonus tip I'm going to give you later on in the episode. So let's dive into this first tip, and this is all about your nutrition. So what are you putting in your body? Are you giving your body that good, nutritious food to move you towards health? And this is important because you want food that helps stimulate the brain function. And there's a quote that I want to tell you here because it really resonated with me, and I'm going to read it out so I get it right. And it is, the food you eat can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. And that last word, poison, really resonated with me, particularly with the journey that I'm on. I'm trying to create a better environment to heal, one from the surgery that I had in January, but also from these lung nodules that I've discovered in the past few months that have spread from the tumour in my pelvis. And one thing that I've really tried to change and help complement this is diet and nutrition. Because when you start looking and researching what's in the foods, especially man-made processed food, high in sugar, high in fat, with a whole host of chemicals in, all those things that we digest and put inside our body is a chemical stress that our body has to process. So by eliminating as much as you can, you really help create a better environment moving you towards health and healing other than sickness and disease. And by reducing this chemical stress, this chemical load that your body has to deal with, it can start to expend energy throughout your body, throughout the system, and do things like heal and express health. Because these man-made foods that are processed, high in sugar, high in fat, lots of chemicals in, create this environment of inflammation. And we know that chronic inflammation is a driving force to chronic disease and illness. So back to that quote, we are either poisoning ourselves slowly over time, which then will create illness and disease, or the opposite. What we put in our bodies is either then create an environment for our body to heal and express health. So what I'm going to do now is go into the 5 foods that I've started to implement in my diet. And the main reasons being is because they help with the brain health, but also the main things that they are helping with is reducing inflammation and the antioxidant stress, 2 things that are driving forces to sickness and disease. So the 5 foods that I've started to incorporate in my diet are blueberries, turmeric, broccoli, nuts, and the last one is pumpkin seeds. So all those that I mentioned do have this anti-inflammatory property and antioxidant property, which helps with the oxidative stress. So again, I'm not going to overcomplicate this, go into too many details, but oxidative stress is a natural part of metabolism. It's all good when there's a good balance, but what happens if your body is having to do too much metabolism and that oxidative stress is too high and you haven't got enough antioxidants within the system to help neutralize it? that's when chronic inflammation occurs. And there's a vicious cycle then. You get an increase of oxidative stress, an increase of inflammation over time, that becomes chronic. And then that again is the driving force for a lot of health issues that we're seeing in this day and age. And there are also a few minerals that I make sure that I have in my diet. And sometimes you have to supplement these because you won't get them in your diet. And even though I mentioned turmeric as something that I've increased in my diet, this is mainly done via supplement form. And this is because it's difficult to get the recommended amounts throughout your diet. So by supplementing it, you definitely get it. And this is something that really does benefit your health because the active ingredient within turmeric is curcumin. I know I probably pronounced that a bit incorrectly, but the active ingredient has been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier, so has a direct effect within the cells. So that's why it makes such a potent anti-inflammatory supplement for you to take, and it's something that I would highly recommend. The other supplements or minerals that I've been taking are magnesium, iron, and copper. All help with the body, particularly the antioxidant properties, but when it comes to optimizing brain health and function, those supplements have been shown to have a positive effect. So you may notice here that the anti-inflammatory, antioxidant effects, there's a trend. I've mentioned it quite a few times now, but that's because this point is so important, and it's one that you need to grasp, is you want to try and reduce as much inflammation within your body as possible. Because when your body is in that chronic inflammatory state, it's in that low-grade stress response. And when you are in that stress response, it's very difficult to heal. Your energy is being expended all over the system rather than directed at specific systems and allowing your body to adapt efficiently and effectively and heal. So the next area of nutrition and health is hydration. I mentioned this in my previous podcast, is when you're dehydrated, your body is in a state of stress because you can only go without water for 3 days before you die. So even if you were slightly dehydrated, your body thinks this is a kind of fight or flight situation. So it has a knock-on effect on your body. And again, when you're in that stress response, your body finds it very difficult to function optimally. So this is one thing that many of us have very little excuse not to be hydrated, especially if you're lucky enough to be in a house with running water. You need to be hydrated. 2 to 3 litres a day is what we should be aiming for. Obviously, it varies between stature, age, activity level, but we need to be drinking more water. And if you can, you need to get a filter to try and reduce this toxic load, these chemicals, because over time, these small differences will make a big difference. So if you can, get a filter to help with that. The second tip that we're going to look into is movement, especially daily movement. So it's important to state here that we are dynamic beings. We need to move for our bodies to function optimally and express health. Yes, it is important to some of us to look good, so gain lean muscle, and we do need this muscle to function well. It's not all about looking well. We need to have strong skeletal muscle, and a reduction in adipose tissue, so fat tissue, makes it easier for us to express health. The more adipose tissue we carry, the more stress that our body is under. So that's why it's important to be of a healthy weight. But the movement has so much more of an effect than just that. It affects every single system in our body. So when we move our body, when we contract a muscle, the muscle releases peptides, so amino acids, which is the molecule that makes up proteins. They go into the body and have an effect on every single system, from cardiovascular system, respiratory, immune system, brain function. So that's why I'm mentioning it here. And the reason why it has an impact on the brain is the molecules have been termed or coined hope molecules, because this is of the positive effects that it has on brain function, particularly elevating mood and managing stress. So I think we've all experienced that feeling of a runner's high or an exercise high after we've done exercise. That's because that molecule is having that positive impact on the brain. So movement is something that if you are able to implement it, and even if you are recovering, so I'll use myself as an example. So if you are recovering from a surgery where your movement is limited, So with myself, my lower limbs, particularly my pelvis, I couldn't move very much. But when I was sat in the chair, I was able to do arm movements, neck movements, and that is still sufficient enough if that's all you can do. So before this surgery, I was extremely active. So it would have been very easy, and it was very close for me to think, well, I can't do what I used to, so there is no point me doing anything else. You need to try and get out of that mindset, change your perspective, and again, little and often makes big difference, particularly when you are healing from a surgery. So moving on to the third tip, and this is all about sleep. And I think hydration and sleep are probably the two things that we have quite a lot of control over that are very underrated and not ignored, but not really given the respect that they are deserved. So sleep, extremely important. It has an effect on every single function of our body. And we all know what we're like after we miss sleep. And as soon as this podcast is focusing on brain health, how do we feel, or how do you feel after you have been sleep deprived for a night or two? You might feel quite restless, anxious, a bit more reactive than your usual self. This is because your body's in a bit of a stress response, and you keep being sleep deprived for day in, day out, weeks and weeks and months. Over time, your body will become a bit patterned to that response, to that stress response. And what happens when you are tired, you then have to try and wake yourself up through means of maybe caffeine, and then you're in a vicious cycle because caffeine in itself can cause a stress response. So sleep and mental health or brain health, it's been shown that if you are sleep deprived, it can increase anxiety, depression, low mood. And I think we've all felt that. Like I just mentioned then, you miss sleep for a day or two and you generally do feel a bit rubbish and you might not be the best person to be around. You keep doing that and it can have a detrimental effect on your health. It's been proven that sleep deprivation, even 6 hours or less over a prolonged period of time, can be a precursor to diseases such as heart problems and cancers. So back to my story, I was one of those people that thought they could function on 5 to 6 hours. Yes, I could function, but I think I was more surviving than thriving. And this is one facet that I think has that is involved with my 10 years of health issues. So that's one pillar of health that I've really, really tried to focus and improve on and try to manage a little bit better. So now my sleep's up to kind of 8 hours a night and I'm feeling the benefits. I'm feeling more energy in the mornings, less tired throughout the day. My energy levels are generally quite stable throughout, and I just generally feel better, more responsive rather than reactive, and just feeling like I've got more capacity to deal with what life's being thrown at me. The main reason why I am focusing on sleep, particularly trying to get into that deep sleep realm a bit more, is for that healing capacity. And in that deep sleep, that's when your body is restoring, regenerating cells. So that's one thing that I'm adding to my arsenal of tricks to help heal from what's going on at the moment. And we all know those people that say I'll sleep when I'm dead, which is true. You will sleep for a very long time when you're dead, but you'll probably get to that day a lot sooner if you do neglect sleep. And I know it can be difficult, but if you want to be around for a long period of time, it is something that you really need to focus on. And if you know you're not getting any sleep, figure out what you can do to help better sleep. Try not to overwhelm yourself though with trying too many things. Just figure out what your sleep routine is at the moment and see what changes you can make to try and improve your sleep. And the main thing you can do initially is stick to a routine. Go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, even at weekends. And I know people like to drink at weekends, but again, if you're really trying to express health and increase productivity, drinking is one thing that you can maybe push to the side for a little bit because it has a huge impact on how you sleep. You might think you sleep well, but it might feel deep, but it's actually not. So that may be one thing that you might want to knock on the head. And again, referring back to my journey, that's something that I have kind of reduced completely in the past 6 months, and I'm probably going to do that for the foreseeable. So as we are talking about brain health, again, chronic sleep deprivation makes you more prone to being anxious, stressed, overwhelmed, feeling low moods, so like depression. Because good quality sleep keeps your mental capacity at a baseline. And what I like to think of as anxiety as you being hypersensitive to a situation surrounding, whether that be perceived from your thought of that circumstance or actually reality. And if you are sleep deprived, you become more sensitive and more reactive. So you almost pattern your nervous system to be more receptive to stressful environments. So this moves me nicely onto that bonus tip. And if you would have been paying attention to the last paragraph, I used the word patterned. So pattern means over time something has changed. So that means you can change and influence your brain for the better. And this is because your brain has neuroplastic properties. And that's just a fancy way of saying your brain and nervous system is able to change and adapt depending on the stimulus and environment that it is in. So neural just means the nerves. Plasticity, if you think of plastic, pliable, you can easily change it. That is what your nervous system is like. So you give it the right stimulus, the right information, over time you can change. And by changing how your nervous system and brain functions, it can have a huge impact on your life. And the key is to engage in whatever you're trying to change consciously and consistently, because it will take time, especially when you're trying to repattern values, beliefs, or habits that have been developing over years. But the key is just to stick with it. And by having a healthy lifestyle, moving daily, thinking well and managing your thoughts effectively, keeping an eye on your nutrition and improving your sleep, it'll make it easier for you to tap into this neuroplastic property or concept. But it is important. Initially, it will take time. Lots of effort, conscious effort, repetition, and you'll get there. And lots of things can help with this neuroplastic property, and learning a new skill, a new sport, a new language, a new hobby. They're all things that can help. I've recently started swimming and I'm noticing a huge impact positively, not just on my physical health, but also the mental health when learning these new skills, creating new connections within the brain. Experiencing new cultures, traveling can really help because you're exposed to a whole new environment. So your brain has to function and think very differently. So that's why travel is good for everything, good for the soul, good for health. Well, there you go. There's 3 tips and the bonus tip to help improve the health of your brain. But of course, it's not just going to help your brain, it's going to help your overall health. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you haven't already, please subscribe so you get the new episodes weekly. And any questions, as always, give me a shout. And I look forward to seeing you soon or speaking to you soon. Peace.